The first voice woke me at 3:07 a.m., and it used my full name, exactly the way my mother used to when she wanted me to stop what I was doing and come downstairs. I lay perfectly still and listened. My apartment was the familiar kind of quiet that has weight to it, the radiator humming like a distant engine, the fridge clicking somewhere behind the kitchen wall, the thin teeth of the moonlight slipping through the curtains and painting the floor in dull silver. I could feel the mattress dip where I hadn't moved for hours, the faint heat of my own body under the sheet. Outside, someone laughed and a car passed, muffled and ordinary, and then the voice came again, softer this time, as if it were breathing through the fabric of the room. At first, I told myself it was a dream, or the leftover hum of a TV from the apartment above. I pressed my palms to my eyes and counted backwards, the old trick to keep panic from organizing itself. The sound had no cadence I could place, not quite a whisper, not quite a throat. It was a sliver of syllables, a scraping of air that formed my name, and then nothing. When I cracked my eyelids open, the room stayed stubbornly the same. The chair by the window, the stack of unpaid bills, the dark hollow beneath the bed where the light never reached. But there was a smell I hadn't noticed before, something like wet paper and cold mud that came from somewhere near the floorboards. It clung to the wool of my socks as if it had been under the house for a long time. My heartbeat moved from the center of my chest down into my throat. I told myself to get up, to turn on the lamp, to see the ridiculous explanation. My feet touched the floor and the boards sighed, thin and hollow. The scrape started again, a slow, deliberate noise like nails drawn across the underside of the bed frame. The voice threaded through it, patient and close enough now that I could feel the air shift against my ankles. I crouched and peered under the bed because that's what you do when the thing in the dark calls your name. You check the simple, human places for simple, human things. My phone's flashlight threw a weak cone into the cavern under the mattress. It showed dust motes, an old sock, the leg of a chair, and then at the far corner where my beam grazed the floor, two pale circles that reflected light like glass. No face, only those empty thin orbs, like eyes that had learned how to hold light and not look away. For a second, I thought my mind was playing tricks, that the exhaustion and late-night coffee had salted the edges of my vision. Then, the thing under the bed leaned its head slightly, and the sound it made was not a voice but a chorus. A thin, layered murmuring that echoed my name in different pitches, overlapping, as if dozens of mouths were learning how to call me from the same throat. I realized then that there wasn't just one sound. There were many, and they were getting closer. I didn't scream. That would have been the clean cinematic response, a sound that admits to fear and invites rescue. Instead, I let my breath come shallow and precise, as if rhythm alone could stitch a seam through whatever was unraveling beneath me. The flashlight trembled in my hand. The two pale circles under the bed blinked as if in time with my pulse. They slid sideways, catching the beam and vanishing into a sliver of dark between the floorboards. The scrape became a conversation. At first, it imitated the simple things. The lullaby my mother hummed when I was small, the baritone of an old radio I used to secretly listen to at night. Each familiar sound folded into the next until memory and present were braided together. Then it changed. The chorus started answering questions I hadn't said aloud, naming streets I hadn't lived on in years, whispering the precise name of a woman I once loved and left without explanation. The air in the room turned thick, like wet cloth pressed against my face. A metallic taste flooded my mouth. I spat, and the sink in the bathroom spat back, as if someone had echoed me from the pipes. I pulled the bed frame out with both hands until the legs scraped the floor and the mattress toppled forward. Underneath was a tangle of shadows that smelled of mildew and iron, like a grave opened in spring. The eyes were not there, but the whispering crawled up the underside of the mattress and slid into the mattress seams. My phone lit the hollow under the bed like a tiny, shivering star, and for a moment I thought I saw a hand, too long, too many joints, slide free and touch the floor. It left a wet, dark smear. I backed away, throat tight, and the voices shifted into a new register. Commands coded in my own voice. "Come closer," they told me, but the syllables were mine, crooked and familiar, as if my head had been turned inside out and someone was wearing my thoughts like a coat. I slammed the door to the bedroom and leaned against it, feeling the wood pulse with a quiet, alien life. The smell followed me: mud, old paper, something like dead grass, and I could hear the house flex, the pipes singing a low, subterranean hum that harmonized with the voices. From the other side of the door, a sound like nails skittering over glass traveled along the floor into my feet. Then something tapped the door twice, slow and patient, as if counting me. I crouched on the carpet and tried to listen for rational noises. Footsteps in the hallway, a neighbor returning home. Nothing. Only the chorus learning how to mimic fear. My own breath played back to me, delayed and wrong, like someone practicing the shape of my panic. I moved to the bathroom because mirrors are supposed to be honest. The light there buzzed, and the mirror stood crisp and smug. For a heartbeat, it reflected me, pale, hollow-eyed, a smear of sweat at the hairline. Then the reflection smiled before I did, a small, crooked thing that widened until the face in the glass became completely alien. I banged my fist on the counter, and the mirror cracked with a sound like a throat being split. Through the spiderweb of fractures, I saw something shift behind the glass. Not my face, but an outline of many faces stacked and pressing against the other side, each mouth forming my name. When I turned, the bathroom door had locked itself. The key was in the lock from the outside. And then, before I even understood how, something cold brushed my ankle from the gap under the door. The cold on my ankle tightened like a band. I grabbed at it and felt nothing but the rough weave of the rug. And then a weight pressed against my calf from the other side, patient and immovable, as if whatever reached under the door had hands that could hold down iron. I kicked hard. Something on the floorboard answered with a laugh that was not quite laughter. It was a rasping of syllables that sounded like my own childhood cough. The door shuddered as if something heavy were leaning on the other side, testing how much force it would take to make me a sound that could be opened. I shoved the door with both shoulders and wood groaned. The latch gave, and the door swung inward on a smell of wet paper and old graves. The hallway was wrong, stretched longer than it should be, the light at the far end blood-washed and shallow. Door frames leaned like tired jaws. My apartment looked like itself, and also like a photograph left in the rain. Colors running, edges smudged. Every door along the corridor had a small, pale face pressed against the glass of its peephole, all of them watching me, and in each face the eyes were mirrors reflecting only me. At the front door, I found that the lock had been turned from the outside. Through the peephole across the hall, I could see my own living room, exactly as I'd left it, except someone sat on my couch, hunched and small, wearing my face. It watched the window and tilted its head the way I do when I think, and then it looked up and smiled in a way I had never smiled. It mouthed something patient and final. I lunged for the knob, and it clicked under my hand like a joke. The corridor breathed, and the chorus inside the pipes slipped into a lullaby. I ran the stairs 2 at a time, the building around me humming with voices that stitched themselves to the grain of the banister. On the landing, a neighbor I knew from the 2nd floor, the man who once borrowed sugar, stood in the stairwell and turned his head. His face wasn't his. It was a collage of the people he'd seen that week, their features layered and sliding like the pages of a book someone else was reading. He said my name perfectly, and I felt the shape of the syllables crawl into my mouth like cold water. Outside the building, the street was empty, and the streetlights blinked as if in time with a distant heartbeat. Windows across the block glowed with the faces of people who should have been sleeping. My high school teacher, watering his plants with my hands. The barista from the corner shop staring back with my tiredness. They all turned their heads together and watched me like a congregation that had been rehearsing a sermon. The chorus poured from open windows, and the concrete itself seemed to hum with the sound of 1,000 tiny throats learning how to call my name. I tried to speak, to tell them I wasn't ready, that this was wrong, that somebody, but whatever I said came out wet and layered, and other mouths answered before I could finish. They answered with my voice, and then with versions of it that had been carved thin and sharpened. The last thing I remember was the sensation of all those reflected selves leaning in at once, 1,000 small, patient breaths pressing into my face until sound folded like paper. I am the sound under your bed.
Subscribe to Horror Story Bar.